Do you want us to do a clap stick or anything with each other, like a countdown? That's I don't
clap after 3.
So
Ready?
on zero.
No 0. 1, 2, 3. I don't know if that worked.
Seems like you didn't clap, Sean.
I didn't hear it.
You went like this. You're like your hands were so slow.
Clap?
I clapped, yeah.
Let's try it again. Ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Sean, did you clap?
Yes.
I heard Andy's clap.
I don't know what to tell you. Mine was perfectly loud over here.
Okay, how about this? On 3, can you guys just say clap?
Sure.
1, 2, 3.
Clap.
Hey everybody, welcome to Co-Pilots. I am Sean Conroy.
And I'm Andy Secunda.
On this podcast, we talk about TV pilots, the first episodes of television shows. Sometimes pilots become long-running series. Others don't make it past that first episode.
We're going to talk about all of them. The great pilots, the bad pilots, the weird pilots, the forgotten pilots. We are TV writers, but it should be noted that we are the dumbest TV writers you know, so all of these are just our dumb opinions.
So dumb.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Co-Pilots. This is the first one we've done, I think, where it was just a limited series, so to speak. Correct?
Right, correct.
So there was only 10 episodes of this show made, only 10 episodes ever gonna be made, only 10 episodes ever to exist. Because sometimes that happens when a show thinks it's gonna go forever, but it makes 10 episodes and then everybody goes, you know what, this is not a great idea. But this show was planned very, very early on to only last 10 episodes.
Right.
If you Google it, a lot of people want to know if there's going to be a season 2, which if you watched it, tough to pull off a season 2. No spoilers, but you know.
I feel like that's a spoiler. I feel like we should cut that.
We'll see.
All right.
All right. So this show was made by the creators and showrunners of The Americans. Did you watch The Americans?
No, I haven't. So I figured that's definitely one we should tackle at some point.
It's amazing. It's a great, great show. Americans, of course, about Soviet spies in the United States in the 1980s. Obviously, that's a spoiler, so we should cut that.
Well, that seems inherent in the promos for the show. So
It's a bit of a giveaway. So they finished that show and they kind of got carte blanche to do what they wanted. And this was the thing they came up with next.
It's interesting right off the bat because it feels, especially in this first episode, it feels almost smaller scale. I mean, other than, that you have Domhnall Gleeson and Steve Carell in it, it feels smaller in that it almost feels like it could be shot as a student film, particularly the premise episode.
Or done as a stage play.
Or a stage play, yes, correct.
Because it's so claustrophobic, it's so contained and very simple in terms of staging and so forth. But of course, what they have tapped into is 2 of America's great obsessions, therapy and serial killers. Everybody loves a good serial killer.
And everybody loves a good therapy.
I would love to find a good therapist.
Therapist, yeah.
Has not gone well for me,
Are you in therapy now?
I am not. No, I had a bad experience last time, and with a therapist that you recommended, by the way. Just to clarify that, yeah. I blame you 100%.
I think that's fair. I don't even remember.
Yeah, well, it was a while ago. It was about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And here was the problem. I'd be in the office spilling my proverbial guts about the agony of my life and whether I wanted to kill someone or not kill someone, and I would look up and the therapist would be sleeping.
Huh. I honestly don't know which therapist you're talking about, so it's very.
I don't think it was somebody that you went to. It was like somebody that you went to recommended this person. So yes, I blame I blame you and your therapist. For
You
this.
can't blame me, because I'm certain that I specified, because I was like, if this was a secondhand recommendation, I would say I don't know this person.
Right.
I cannot recommend this person.
Fair enough. I don't remember that, but I'm quite certain that you would absolve yourself of all responsibility before making any kind of recommendation like that.
That sounds like me.
Yes. How can I get out of this before anything goes wrong?
I mean, I'm the kind of person who just makes qualifications. That's what I'm best at.
You're that type of person.
That's why I'm in therapy.
It was incredibly expensive. I was paying for it out of pocket. I noticed it happening. And of course, this is why I deserve to be in therapy, was because rather than confronting the therapist right away and saying, hey, wake up, I shifted my gaze and acted as if nothing was going wrong. So I kept going to that therapist for another year, and it was just a constant, sleep therapy thing in a different way from,
Sean, I think this points to a larger issue than his responsibility, or you're confronting him. I think it points to you just don't have enough pizzazz in your therapy stories. I mean, I don't know. It seems like it's
Cut
kind of
to
meandering.
camp, 1977.
There you go.
A lonely boy walks to a locker. He spins the lock. Nothing happens. He spins it again. Yanks. Nothing happens. He looks perturbed. Anyway.
Sean, I can't help you with your problems, but I gotta say, you are a fantastic storyteller.
Close up on the same lonely boy as the sun sets in the distance, and he decides he's going to stay for one more night.
Sean, I wondered if I could bring some other, peers of mine into these sessions. You have just been magic since the beginning. It's like I can't tear my eyes away from you.
Hey, everybody! Thanks for coming out to my therapy session. Great to be here. Anyway, it was a fucking disaster. So,
Well, I'm honestly so sorry. That's so horrible.
Thanks for nothing.
You want to hear a counterpoint in terms of our personalities to that story?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Did you slap a therapist when they started falling asleep?
No, but I once had such an intense confrontation with my therapist that
Restraining order?
That he said in the following session, after our last session, I sought counseling, and so I drove my own therapist
To therapy.
to therapy, which I kind of took it as a sort of a badge of honor.
Now, you don't have to answer this question, but I will ask it nevertheless.
Very good.
Do you remember what the confrontation was about?
It was about my tardiness, and he was raising it as though it was just a larger therapy issue, which it is. It's something that I've grappled with, and I think I've made a certain amount of progress on, but I still want to make more.
We were talking about that in the 20 minutes before you showed up to lunch the other day.
But
He's gotten better, has he?
Whose voice was whose in that conversation.
Actually, I was the last one to get there the other day, in fairness.
Ha! It's a kunda. But yeah, and my issue was like, and he kept trying to say, well, let's talk about you and your feelings about it. And I was like, I'm fine. I promise you, I'm not the kind of person who's not going to talk about whatever is at hand in therapy or hide from it. I'm going to talk about it. I need to hear you say that this isn't just a therapy issue, that it is bought because it clearly is aggravating you personally, and you keep evading that. And he kept oh no, I've become Sean.
How do you like it? How does it feel?
It's not great. Ugh.
Did you eventually talk a lot about your tardiness?
Well, eventually I did, but I will also say he eventually admitted that I was correct and that he did have a dog in the race, and or horse in the race. I don't know what it is, but
there's a lot. There could be a turtle. There's turtle
Right.
races at
He
this
had
bar near here.
He had a cigar in the OTB, but whatever the case, he admitted that he was annoyed, and he did have actual feelings on it, and that he was avoiding saying it. And I said, all right, well, now we can talk about it. And then I admitted whatever he wanted me to admit.
Right. Because the therapist always has a very specific thing they want you to admit, right?
Yeah, that's the process of
Then
therapy.
we came back the next week and I was like, what do you want me to admit this time? I will.
Well, he wants me to dig into my own feelings, and I'm like, I can dig into my own feelings, but you have to admit that you have feelings. And a lot of the time, if they're a good therapist, they don't necessarily have, their primary feeling is empathy, hopefully. But in this case, I could tell it wasn't, and he wasn't admitting it.
My therapist's primary feeling was sleepiness, apparently.
Well,
So,
again,
not an emotion, just a physical, overwhelming sensation.
And again, I'll just say maybe that you need to look inward to your inner showman and ask him what his
Close up on a man in therapy. He's perturbed but afraid to be confrontational because he's paying a lot of money. Anyway, these guys felt that therapy was an important thing to talk about. And then apparently they were like, that's not enough. We can't just have people sitting there talking about therapy. Clearly they didn't hear the first part of this podcast. So they added the element of the great American hero, serial killers. Do you agree with me that people are way too obsessed with the fun of serial killers?
Well, I don't know if I'd say the fun of serial killers. They are
Just that
obsessed with
it's
serial
fascinating and interesting, and people are making a big deal out of it all the time.
They're definitely obsessed with with whatever aspect it is that draws them, and I would say I'm a person who's not as drawn. I like the sort of fanciful versions, and this is sort of an interesting sort of version because I think they really are going, I think successfully, for more of like the mundaneness of a real life possible serial killer, as opposed to a Hannibal Lecter who's referenced in this pilot. That is more of the. They say he's a robot. I don't think he's the opposite of robot. I think he's a complete, like, he's a huge flamboyant character.
Yeah, he has a tremendous amount going on. The whole point of Hannibal Lecter is that he's like, I love music, I love art, I have a memory palace.
Yeah.
And that's not a robot thing. That's more of like, I'm intensely human, more so than other people.
But yeah, people are obsessed with it, and particularly. So I guess my point was, I am someone who follows the sort of the narrative versions of serial killers, although it's not my primary interest in media. I'm not someone who's like, oh, I'm going to watch all these documentaries or shows about serial killers or killings in general.
You like the fanciful romantic versions of serial killers versus like the horrific real life representations.
I like the lovable killers. I do find it interesting that the people who are drawn to those kinds of real life stories. Are you one of them, Sean?
I get creeped out by that stuff. I do get interested in serial killer stuff, but I have a really hard time doing that, like watching the documentary stuff, just because it's so upsetting always,
And I think that's what draws people to it. It's just interesting, the distinction.
On an even more basic, like serial killer is like kind of the extreme level of it, but then there's like I was just thinking about this yesterday because I don't know, I was up too late and had MSNBC on, and MSNBC has Dateline on every night, and it's always about some poor people who got murdered, and it's their show every night, and it's like, who is watching this show anyway? I do love a good serial killer story. So let's go.
As long as it's fake. You like the fake ones.
The fans, this guy, I'm, all day. I love his acting style. Okay. So let's just get into the show. We start with the great Steve Carell wakes up, something's going on. We don't know what. He wakes up asleep, but he's in his clothes. He's under a weird blanket. He's clearly, it seems like maybe he's hungover or something. We're not sure what's going on with him.
Yeah.
He gets up and he realizes there is a chain attached to his ankle, which is that's startling, And
I would say even from that moment, the way that is handled both by Carell and by director Chris Long, who does a fantastic job in this this pilot episode, you could play it and it almost feels like it would be the way you would first think to write it. Talking about first thought would be him sort of tripping on the thing or pulling on him as he tries to walk away from the bed. But the more realistic thing is you would realize it's there just
It's a
on the
big,
walk
heavy
across. It's a big
chain.
heavy chain.
Yeah.
So it's just right. And I think that's kind of indicative of the whole tone of the show, is that every choice that in another movie or television show about a serial killer would be a little bit more extreme and arch. And in this, everything is sort of softened and kind of the edges are sort of polished off it. So it's everything feels mundane.
Mhm.
And I think even that moment is kind of like, oh, why do I have a chain on my
Right. I mean, they get to, in that scene, they get to him sort of panicking.
Yes, but
But
in a
it's
very
more-
organic way.
Yeah, it's more perplexing right away. Like what, which I think is what you're saying, feels like the more natural thing. Like you wouldn't look at a chain attached to your leg and go, "Oh my God, I've been captured by a serial killer." and so he's just puzzled, and then slowly starts to realize what's going on,
Yeah.
and then panics. And then I do really enjoy the thing at the end of like him seeing the razor and the toothbrush and the medication and everything laid out very neatly for him. So it's like somebody's looking out for him, even though he's in this weird captured place.
One thing that occurred to me this time that did not occur the first time.
Mm.
It's got to be a lot of planning involved in capturing your therapist, because there are ties back to, I understand they used a fake name, but there are ties back to him, and he wants to get all this stuff, this medication and all this crap.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got to do a lot of things to make sure they're, both. It's not even, it feels like killing someone would be easier than what he's doing here.
Right.
See, I'm just saying, you got to give this guy props. I mean, he really thought it through.
Well, and I would say for me, it would be quite simple to capture my therapist because I would just have to do it while they were asleep.
Just go into one of your fucking camp stories. He's
Anyway,
out like a
on the
light.
second day, we all had to
Oh.
introduce ourselves and tell about one
Jesus Christ.
interesting scar and how we.
I think I know what your problem is, Sean.
Angle on, someone listening to the boy talk about his scar.
Oh, Mr. Conroy, do you feel like people don't listen to you? Is that what you feel like your problem is?
Then we come in on the next scene, and we find out that he's a psychotherapist because he's with a patient. Is he with a patient in the second scene?
I believe that they cut to that.
And
yes.
then they go to him making a phone call to his daughter, who doesn't answer him, and he leaves a message saying that he's going to be in sessions, and we get the exposition of like, this guy is a psychotherapist.
And then what's amazing about this pilot, and of course, if you've done The Americans for as long as they have, and haven't seen it, but it's obviously so well, it's regarded in the
6 seasons, I believe,
in the tier of television, where people, next level television, and you can kind of tell it immediately in terms of storytelling. It's like he wakes up, he's got the chain, you establish the room, you establish the tone. We're at 3:20 at that point.
Yeah.
Then, wait, I think you might go into,
I think it was in his kitchen. He's chopping apples. He's not in psychotherapy yet.
right. And so that's another thing, is they establish these things. There are these little snippets that, feel irrelevant. And like, if it was under the harsh eyes of a creative executive, they might feel like, well, we're wasting time, or the writer himself might cut that stuff. And it's interesting looking at it now in retrospect, it establishes the tone, not just of the show, but of the character and where the character is. Because if you're winding up the tension that much in the opening scene, and then you're spending this time on these mundane things of him going through his life, and it's such a great performance by Carell of there's some kind of pain beneath the surface, but mostly it's like this feeling of emptiness in those actions that's communicated. It's really impressive, dialogueless.
Right. Nobody says anything. And I kept waiting for him, like he was chopping the apples and whatever, and I just kept waiting for him to say, that's what she said or whatever, because
well, that was a great disappointment. It's like it's like, hey, you're not being funny at all, Steve Carell. What's going on?
Right.
And
enough with the acting, pal. So then the next scene is where we see him in therapy with a guy wearing sunglasses who's being super aggressive and talking about how his father used to beat the shit out of him and it really fucked him up. And he's angry and it's disturbing. I mean, it's the kind of thing that an encounter a therapist would have with a patient, where the therapist would then have to go seek counseling themselves, when somebody is that...
I mean, I feel like the subtext of what you're saying now is that possibly, you know what, I'm not even going to get into it. I'm not going to point any fingers. It's funny that you say aggressive, because I actually feel like he was probably less aggressive than I was with my therapist in that session. I feel like he's you can feel the menace, because of the way he's wearing the sunglasses and the hat and everything.
Right.
But also, Gleason has such a great, first of all, fantastic job on the accent. Now, I don't know if he's picking a specific, he's clearly picking a specific vocal pattern, but the flat Americanness of the accent is really effective for this, in that he seems like no one. He's just like, he's so, it's the opposite of Hannibal Lecter. He has almost, the choices he makes are all meant to be small, and muted is the word that comes to mind.
Well, here's another word that comes to mind, which is bland. He comes across as so bland, even though he's being super aggressive. And
yes,
it was funny. I looked him up today on IMDb. He's on IMDb. I'm on there too, if anybody.
what's your star meter?
I think it's like an 8 or 9, something like that.
I don't think that's can't be accurate.
I'm not paying close attention to my star meter, unfortunately. But I looked him up and I saw photos of him, because I don't really know his career. I don't know his work that well. And I was like, oh, he's a fucking handsome guy.
Yeah.
And in this, he just looks like just so bland,
Yeah.
like so unnoticeable, so uninteresting. And I feel like this is where I don't know what I'm talking about, but I feel like even like the basement that they're in at the beginning, the color scheme, the clothing he wears, it's all so boring and not interesting.
And this is where the real
on purpose. I'm not saying it's like boring to look at. I'm saying clearly.
No, I agree with you. These people screwed up, and we need to call them out. I agree.
It put me to sleep.
I mean, this was more boring than a Sean Conroy
It was like a therapy session.
Yeah, it's all those things you're saying. And the thing that's impressive, both in his performance and in the basement set, is they are both the utmost of bland and basic, and they are also menacing at the same time. It had the basement had, to me, it sort of put me in the mind of like when you go over, maybe not to a friend's house, but a friend's parents' house, and you go into their basement area, or their rumpus room, or whatever the hell they have, and you can just feel the weird alien like life that has been lived there, that is like gives you a weird creepy feeling.
I even feel like you can sort of smell it, like you go into a room like that's downstairs in a house, and there's just a remnant of moisture and some kind of weird, like it has not been ventilated properly. It's all closed off. So anyway, it just is.
Yeah. And how do you communicate that with just like not even making extreme choices in the production design? It's really impressive in how it's shot, how it's lit.
I agree with you about the way he talks, which I think is even more impressive, because I don't know where he's from. Somewhere in.
He's Irish.
Okay, if he's Irish, that means he probably has some kind of an accent, and it's completely unnoticeable. And I think that is a thing that I have a huge issue with, is that so many actors from Great Britain and Ireland come over here and try to do American accents, and it's very distracting to me every time they do, because they always sound like they're trying to say, look, I grew up in Oklahoma, I'm a regular American.
I feel like the bigger mistake that I see people making, British and Irish actors, is they base all their characters on like a New York cop or cabbie. So it's like, yeah, no, we got to get downtown and blah, blah, blah. I'm talking like an American. Come on, Mac. But it's like from the 1940s. It's the wrong era they're going on.
It's hard. I mean, acting is hard. Accents are hard. But anyway, yeah. So we see him in that scene and he's, you know, he's angry, not as angry as Andy is when he's at therapy, but still
I'm enraged.
Pretty.
By the way,
yeah,
I'm pretty sure I was also terrifyingly calm, but I was persistent.
And in the therapist's head, he was going, I wonder if Andy has a rumpus room.
The one thing I wanted to point out, I don't know if you noticed it I think it's the first therapy scene or with Sam, who's using an alias at that point. He has the baseball cap and the sunglasses, and he's wearing a T-shirt with a guy with baseball cap and sunglasses. And I tried to look it up online and figure out what the T-shirt is to see if it was a real life thing. I don't know. Is Kenny Chesney the name of the musician that he eventually?
That happens later, yes.
Later, yes.
Not in the pilot.
So I wondered if it was a fake Kenny Chesney shirt or something like that. But I just thought that was a funny, subtle, weird touch. That he's just like, it's almost like the character's trying to figure out how a human would dress. He's like,
this T-shirt is like a regular person. I should dress like the character on this T-shirt.
Right. And I think that kind of plays into how the character's operating in his life throughout the series. But I think it's also how Gleason is kind of behaves and moves around the room. I kind of the way I eventually sort of landed on, with his hair sort of plastered down and his clothes are a little bit oversized, but it kind of made me think of like, oh, this is a character that's completely arrested from his childhood, and he moves around the world that way until he explodes in violence.
Right. It's just he's at simmer all the time until that moment where he...
But the childhood aspect of it makes us, to a certain degree, have some sympathy and understanding for him and for the child that was abused, because he's playing it out and how he moves around and how he dresses and how he wears his hair. But obviously that's counterbalanced by that this is a complete and utter narcissist.
And that he's a serial killer.
Oh yeah, also that. Yeah, I mean, we don't really like
he's a cute kid in a way, but also,
Yeah, he also murders people consistently for no reason.
Compulsively. So now we are into a series of scenes. I would call it a montage. I don't know if you would agree with that, but it's a montage of various patients, including Domhnall Gleeson, or whatever, however you say his name.
Domhnall Gleeson, I think is the way to say it. Donald. Could be correcting you in the wrong way.
But we see somebody saying sorry for your loss, and she's disconnected from saying it, but it feels like she's really saying it to Steve Carell. We see another patient who is clearly trying to take care of Steve Carell's needs over his own, and that's part of his problem. So, and then we see this angry guy talking about how his father hit him. Oops, that's a Freudian slip right there, huh?
Your therapist would perk up. Oh, finally, some action.
Flashback to childhood. A boy comes home from camp. His father makes a fist.
Don't make this a movie, Sean. No, don't. This is.
So he's still talking about how his father used to beat the shit out of him. It did make me laugh. I mean, there's moments that are funny where he says, "My father." I can't remember exactly how it was, but it was like, yeah. So anyway, my father used to beat the shit out of me, and Steve Carell said, the therapist says, "Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?" And he goes, "Yeah, pretty much all the time," which is like, oh, okay. What I'm saying is a father abusing a child is hilarious. That's my point.
It was clear.
Yeah.
I think the montage of sort of other patients and his other interactions is really effective, also because they're doing this dance that they it seems to be the take of the show, and I'm curious what your take is, having had a mixed experience with some therapists. It seems to be the take of the show that Carell is a good therapist in this, that he is empathetic to his patients. And so the interesting balance that they sort of pull off in those first scenes with his patients is he does seem plugged in and empathetic, but he also seems a little bit like removed and like he's got his own thing going on, which is a very difficult thing for Carell to act, that he pulls off incredibly well. And that eventually leads into what we surmise about what happened with his wife. And it's just that there's this pain, but there is a removed aspect to it. So there's this sort of like going through his day in the same way that they show him flossing, but it also is like he's sort of fighting through it and trying to stay plugged in and empathetic.
It's clear all the way through that even from the moment he wakes up on the couch, I think, or the bed, whatever the thing is in the basement, it's clear that he's going through something painful, even though we don't know what it is yet. And like you said, we eventually find out that he's kept the corpse of his wife lying in his bed for a long time.
No, Sean, that was a dream sequence.
Okay, I misunderstood.
So I did want to get into that, because the first time around watching it, I was like, oh, I guess all the pieces of this will fit later. But now I've seen the whole season, and even though obviously it's suggesting his pain and his, fear also, I'm even now a little bit confused about the baby.
Yes. Well, we'll get to more about the baby later, because
Okay.
we do have, but you're right. The baby, I don't know. I only watched it once. I didn't rewind it. I didn't zoom in. I don't have the zoom in kind of TV, but it looked like the baby was like a weird, almost like a skull baby of some sort or something like that.
I almost felt like he was like a Joker baby from Batman. He like had this white makeup and a big weird mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not wrong, did he have little sunglasses? Am I putting that on in my head?
I didn't notice that. It's possible, but I didn't notice
If it's sunglasses, then I assume that it ties back.
If it's sunglasses, it feels a little on the nose. And I'm not just saying that because that's where you...
Or it could be a
wear
targeted
sunglasses.
marketing ad for, a Baby
Ray-Bans?
Geniuses sequel.
Oh, yes.
Could be that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But-
I wasn't sure what they were communicating with that, other than maybe it's something about his Steve Carell's own dysfunctional family dynamics.
Well, here was my, because I had watched it once before as well, and I think I had a similar reaction to you the first time of like, oh, this is letting us know what's going to happen later. And it wasn't really that specific. Like, it didn't turn out that his son was the Joker or whatever. It was like, he's just a guy who works in a pawn shop. But what I thought... Is
that what they were communicating the whole time? And the son set it up.
What I took from it was that, first of all, psychotherapy is often, or at least in popular culture, is often so much about dreams. Right. And dreams don't always make sense. There's something going on that's weird and uncomfortable, and it's related to his family, but it's not like you can look at it and go, oh, this is what's happening.
So you're saying that they're saying it's just more of an emotional experience, and that's what they were going for.
That's what I felt this time when I watched it.
I think that's fair, and that's a more subtle way to approach dreams. And I think in general, again, not to spoil anything, but there is speaking as a Jew, there's a very Judaic sort of tone and themes that are even starting to be pulled out even in this first episode. And I got to say, even having seen the full season and sort of tried to think about it, almost on an intuitive level, I sort of connected to themes about the Holocaust. But even in the end of it, I'm not even really sure what they were sort of landing on. And one of the things that I sort of read from, I'm not sure if it was Joel Fields or Joe Weisberg, one of the things that they said about how they develop characters is that they start by writing, say, a Steve Carell character, and it's just like a blob. And then they basically discover things about the character as they write. And I wonder if it's similar with moves like this, that it's like, well, this feels right. and we're not gonna, dig into it too much for similar reasons to what you're saying, Sean, of like, we're going for an emotional content that feels somehow right, but we're not gonna sort of leave it David Lynch style and not go, here's the answer.
Right.
But as someone who wants answers, that's very frustrating.
Oh, me too. I want to know exactly what's going on at all times. But here's a couple things that occurred to me. One of them is to tag back to something you were saying earlier about him being a good therapist, and it's related to what you're saying about the Jewishness of the show, because literally at some point in the pilot, Gleason says, you're the best. I chose you. I went to 3 Jewish therapists, and you were the one I decided to work with. Which, right, again, is just a weird, funny thing for him to say. Like, of course he went to 3 Jewish therapists, not something else. And what that made me think, and this is just me completely talking out of my butt, but there's the mythical character of the golem. And I wonder if that's related to the way that baby is fabricated in the crib there.
Oh, Sean.
Yeah. So let's get Joe Fields on the phone and find out if that's. But you know what I mean? Like, there's something lurking there that's going to be problematic later on, and it's just being put together. It's in its Genesis right now, and I don't say Genesis just to reference the Old Testament, which the Jewish people love.
I know I love it.
Yeah.
Finally, he's talking my language.
But so he has this dream. We see the corpse of his wife holding a guitar. And then the next scene, we see him lugging a guitar into, I can't remember if it was like a payday loan shop or a pawn shop or something like that. And he goes and sees his son.
Right.
Ezra.
Played by Andrew Leeds, who I know. So I don't know if he'll have an answer to the Golem question, but
Golem. Sorry, I was thinking of Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
who's really amazing in this, and a very tiny. It becomes sort of a central part later on, but it's in keeping with that. There's so many things in that one. Do you want to talk about that scene before I start breaking?
No. Go ahead, please. All I want to say before we get into it is, and this is only because I spent some time on IMDb. Yeah. First of all, I recognize that guy, and it's funny to me that he plays also the sort of distant son in Barry, Henry Winkler's son. Like, that's his his specialty, apparently, is like sons who are alienated from their fathers.
And also, he hasn't really been in touch with me in a while. So, he's kind of, I feel like in some ways have this.
That was an interesting thing that I found in my IMDb rabbit hole, was that he was on an episode of the Goldbergs that you were also on. So
was he really?
I believe so. Although then I went to the bad
friend. Then
I went to the episode and his name was not in the credits. It said he was in that episode, but then it listed you and not him in the credits, and I was like, maybe he's not in that episode. But I thought that was a funny connection to see out there.
The Goldbergs, a very serious show that handles Judaic themes in a similar fashion to The Patient.
I believe Jeff Garlin is the golem on that show, correct?
Yes, one might say. So in that scene, again, it's such a fascinating interaction, the way they basically, Steve Carell is trying to say, well, I don't really play it and it's sort of going away, so why don't you take the guitar? And Andrew,
you're the one who plays it. You're the one who plays the guitar.
Right. Andrew Leeds, what do you remember what he says exactly?
He says, I don't anymore.
I just don't play it anymore.
Yeah.
And he says it flatly. He doesn't really say it. It's not anything that's going on is all beneath the surface. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like, if we are to assume that the mother has passed on and that Steve Carell is like, here, take this keepsake from her, and he says no, basically in any form, then it's like, you don't know anything really, and yet you know everything you need to know emotionally in that moment. So it's really impressive.
Well, and here's one more thing.
And again, impressive in their performances.
Yeah. And this is one other thing that I think that you should absolutely correct me on. But to me, watching it, and maybe this is just because
it's pronounced it's pronounced chutzpah. Is that what your question was going to be?
No. I was
Chutzpah.
going to say, why don't they say oy vey ever? Like, why doesn't
It is weird. It is. Those aren't Jews.
but no, but it is related to that, because what I was, maybe this is just because I grew up in New York, but you see Steve Carell's character and you see his son, and they both look like different denominations of Jewishness, like the
Yes.
son is clearly way more devout than the father in that scene.
And this is where, as a Reform Jew, I can't speak to the exact breakdown, but I think that it's basically like they were maybe not more Reform, and the mom was more Reform, and then he has become more conservative, maybe to the extreme of being Hasidic. I don't think he's Hasidic.
Or Orthodox anyway.
Yes, it's Orthodox. I think that they're probably conservative and he's probably Orthodox.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. And they do talk more about that later on. But again, it's that thing of where there's a very evident difference between the two of them from the moment he walks into the shop, and there's the other guy working there, but it's never referenced in any way. And it's just an interesting detail that will become more important later on.
Right.
Okay, then we're back in the office. Steve Carell is furious at his patient for not opening up more. He's wearing sunglasses still. He wants him to take the sunglasses off. He wants him to, I guess, stop deflecting or something like that. And Gleason is not sure. Gleason's character, who we still don't know his real name, is not sure that he can be helped. And Steve Carell makes the point that anybody who has gotten as far as going into therapy is someone who can be helped.
Right.
And we as viewers, or at least me as viewers, just had a moment of like, I don't know, because we already saw what happened at the beginning of this episode,
Right.
So we'll see.
How do you think, before he kidnaps him, how do you think that Strauss handles Sam? Do you think he handles him in an able way, or do you think he sort of makes missteps as a therapist?
I feel like he does a good job. He's trying to give him, this is the wrong phrase to use in therapy, he's trying to give him enough rope to hang himself. He's trying to let him come out of his shell and tell him what's going on and what's brought him in. And he keeps going back to the same thing. My father was abusive when I was a kid, and they don't really get beyond that. And that's why this scene is important, because he finally says, we're not getting anywhere. And I think you need to start telling me stuff. And it feels to me, now I don't have a lot of legs to stand on here, because my experience with therapy was mostly that it was nap time, but it feels like that is what a good therapist would do, is not try to push somebody until a certain point and then go, okay, we're there. Now start letting me know what is really on your mind.
I guess, to Sam's credit, Strauss puts his finger on the thing that is wrong, which is like, well, we're not going to get any further unless you open up to me more than you're doing. You're always vague, and there's a wall at a certain point. And Sam realizes he's right, and he's willing to make that adjustment. But the next step is, I am a serial killer. This is the next level of honesty.
Right.
And he knows that if he does that, he's going to go to jail. So it's like, all right, I guess I'll just have to kidnap you.
Right.
It kind of adds up.
Then we are in the scene where he's making tea for himself. And this is where I actually wrote down in my notes just the word, which we've already discussed a little bit, deliberate. Like, it is so moment to moment, like this is happening. He's steeping the tea bag several times in the boiling water. And it's like, okay, we get it. Something bad is about to happen.
Right.
And it just feels, not in a bad way, it feels very different from the ordinary pace of television, where you're like, okay, we got to get to the next act break and then move on to the next thing. And it's more like, here's my mundane life and I'm making tea.
Yes. And again, as with everything else in the show, it communicates both the menace you're talking about and the metaphor of this kettle boiling and the pressure building up, but also Steve Carell's just sort of like, this is my life. He's just sitting there making tea, and then he'll see another patient, and then he'll go to sleep and he'll have a nightmare, and then he'll wake up and he'll see another patient, and he'll floss his teeth, and which one could argue, I don't know if this is communicated, is his life any different once he is captured?
Right.
I don't know if that's what's being set up.
Right. But so so it's very mundane, except tonight is different because it's windy. It's windy outside, and he needs to go investigate the wind. And so he goes outside to see what's going on. And then something happens, and we don't know what it is, but we get the sense that this is why he woke up in the basement.
Now, let me ask you, because Sam seems so deliberate, when there's all that racket in the back, and then he goes out to investigate, and then that's when he's knocked out. At first I was like, oh, that's interesting. He's kind of seems like he's making a gaffe there in a way that Sam wouldn't necessarily make. But then I thought, oh, maybe he's intentionally making noise so that Carell comes out, and then he's not locked in his house. Then he hasn't approached the house. I don't know if he's afraid of video cameras. And so, he's basically drawn him out of safety. Do you think it was intentional that he makes all that noise in the back, or do you think
that would be my assumption? Because we also don't get to see what he did to knock the therapist out.
Right. Maybe he brought things like an old time radio show. He brought kind of coconuts to make a horse noise, and a bunch of cans, and so he's just shaking them and doing a bunch of stuff in the back.
Or I was thinking maybe he just brought a recording of one of my therapy sessions and just put him right out. But whatever the case, it does feel like he's planned it out very well. So it felt to me like the noise was to draw him out, and then he injected him with whatever, or chloroformed him, or hit him over the head with a club, or whatever he did to. I don't think it was hit him over the head with a club, because that would have been a different reaction. It was some kind of chemical thing, because of the way he reacted in that opening scene.
Yeah.
And maybe
sang him a very quick lullaby.
Maybe that was why we see the can rolling around on the ground out there. But then we go, and we're in the basement again. Carell is asleep again on the bed. Somebody is there. So he wakes up because there's noise in the basement. There's something going on. Then I think this scene gets the award for longest urination in the history of television. And spoiler alert, but that is a thing they come back to a number of times over the course of the series. And
it's incredibly effective. I guess my read on it, and I'm curious if you agree, is that again, it's like it's not anything violent. It's not anything inherently terrifying. And it's not even necessarily something that's egregiously insensitive to the other person. It's just insensitive enough and not caring about the other person's feelings or what they might be hearing or how they might be experiencing this, that it's like on a subtle level, it is like Sam is soiling himself on Strauss's soul. That is the way it feels every time. I think that's the way it's intended to feel. And it's fascinating that it's not even like he leaves the door open. The door's closed, but also he's kidnapped this guy. He should be aware that he hears everything that's going on in this room, in this dead silent environment. And you could just use the bathroom upstairs, but he wants the convenience of using this room before he goes and talks to Strauss. And that's where this ultimate narcissism is communicated every time he does it.
Yeah. And I think there's, he should be aware of it, especially when, he basically, there's different levels of stream strength when somebody urinates. And this is like, on the star meter of stream strength, this is like a 9.5. It's just like
it's lower if it's a higher star meter. I could be wrong.
Again, I think you understand what I'm saying. It's very powerful, and very noisy is the most important.
Giving this urination its due. That's all I'm saying.
I submitted to IMDb to give it its own credit. you know, when you type in it would come right after Uri Geller. It would go Uri Geller urination. Then they get into the conversation about how this stuff is not working.
Right.
And it's such a tense and intense scene because Carell is really starting to realize the impact of what's going on.
And he does, they also written it in such a smart way that in addition to him freaking out and him, you know, first he tries to get angry, then he tries to get stern, then he tries to, it's like he's going through all of the motions and all the steps that someone who is used to handling people on a psychodynamic level would go through. Like it's like playing your intelligence, you're playing the scene to the top of your intelligence, to use an improv term.
Classic improv term.
I mean, he's really yes-anding the serial killers. But
this
I mean,
is like the third beat of the show.
I mean, when they went into that zip zap zup to warm up for their conversation,
They just had each other's backs.
a couple of jerks. Anyway, I just think it's, you know, I think a bit, particularly in a show that's just these two and the mental tete-a-tete that's going on, it's very hard to make any missteps in terms of like, well, that doesn't make sense that he's doing that. And I think this show is one of the things it does the best from for the most part, from beginning to end, is, all right, what would Carell do next? Like, what would be a logical next choice? What would be the things that he would think to do? And I think even in this first scene, it's sort of like, yeah, everything that he's doing sort of tracks. It doesn't get him out of there, but it tracks.
And I mean, this is probably my favorite moment of the scene, but it's when it gets to the point where he goes, I don't have to tell anybody anything unless you tell me that you're about to commit another crime. And he goes, I'm about to commit another crime. And it's just like, oh boy.
Now, when he says that, again, do you think that is Sam? Because it's also hard to tell. Do you think that's Sam going, well, I want you to stay here, so I'm just going to tell you I am? Or do you think it's just, well, this is the truth?
I think he's just admitting it. I don't think it's like he's
a maneuver.
Yeah, he just, I mean, he says he's enraged at this guy for months and wants to kill him, and he's trying to stop himself. And so in that moment, he's like, yeah, I am. I'm about to do it, you know?
It's also, it's kind of the feeling of an animal that you might think is a dangerous animal, but you're not sure is a dangerous animal. Like it's just sitting there still. Is he kind of has that vibe. And so it's like with a lot of the things he does, sometimes he seems very smart and two steps, not necessarily ahead, but like he is prepared for every maneuver that Strauss is going to pull on him mentally. And in some ways, he is like a child and is like, has never had this kind of conversation or interaction with anyone and doesn't know what to do or how to, if Carell is manipulating him or not. So I think that's was a lot. I think it's in this first episode, so I don't think it's a spoiler, but a lot of the show is a sort of a feeling of, does Sam know what Strauss is trying to do, or does Sam not know?
Right.
And it's very unclear a lot of the time, which of course is terrifying.
Right. This, by the way, is the scene where he says the thing about, you're the best. I met with 3 different Jewish therapists.
Right. What do you make of that?
You. I don't know. I think it's just a weird, like, I do think there's a lot of people who, you know, it's the classic thing of like, go to a Jewish doctor. You want your therapist to be Jewish. Like there is a thing about that in the world. And so this guy is saying, you know, it's his way of taking on the world, is going, this is what people say. They say Jewish therapists are the best. So I went to 3 Jewish therapists,
right,
and you were the best of those 3. So obviously you're the best. He doesn't have a real human way to interact with them, you know?
Right. But it's also that it's that racism or prejudice through compliment, you know?
Right.
It's just
you're
like,
great because you're Jewish and you do therapy.
Right.
And I guess we can, because that's kind of the end of the episode. I just feel bad for Carell's character because, he's chained in the basement and he was a virgin till he was 40 years old. So
No, I think you're mixing the sort of mythologies.
He's just been having sex for a couple of years now, and
no, that's the 40-year-old virgin's a totally different story.
That's what she said.
I mean, I guess. Well, again, that's The Office. I mean, it's possible he is a virgin, and maybe that was at play somehow. No, he has a son, so they would have had to adopt. So I guess there's just a lot to establish if they're tying those two franchises together.
That's true. That is true. I didn't think about the son, Ezra.
Although we don't know if he's his biological son.
No.
One last thing I just wanted to bring up because it was a personal affront to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't anything about the Judaism in
was it about
series.
somebody being tardy and you were like, that guy should be allowed to be tardy?
I don't defend my tardiness. I feel bad about it. I work on it. That was the reason it came up, as a matter of fact. It's the food.
Yes.
It's that over the course of the series, minor spoiler alert, Sam is obsessed with food. He does a lot of research. He has a lot of opinions on the best food. I find this to be one of the most patently offensive characterizations of a type of person, not the Jewishness, the fact that this serial killer is a foodie. We're normal people. We're like everybody else.
Well, yes, we should be clear that you yourself consider yourself a foodie. You're a guy who posts photos of your food on Instagram, and you go to different restaurants, and you like food, right? You're very different from the rest of us in terms of you enjoy food.
I mean, I'll sometimes eat 3 meals a day.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much I like this thing.
Right.
That's how much I love this hobby that I'm committed to.
I do it for sustenance, but I resent it the entire time. I'm like, why?
You would just eat a cube of meat and vegetables if you could, and just
right. If it was easy to make that, yeah. Soylent Green.
He's clearly obsessed and has lots of opinions and is always sort of touting it. And it's a lot. It's very much the. He's kind of like, they have a little bit of the incel quality of like him being very mansplainy. And he's sort of, about the music guy and about the
right. Well, the music thing didn't come up in this, but that does come up later.
Doesn't it come up?
No.
I feel like you come back to it, and it does come up because he mentions, you talk about this and you talk about country music, but we don't get into anything
in the office, yeah.
And that is another moment, is he's talking about, I believe in retrospect, one of Kenny Chesney's songs. And he's saying he basically takes the bullet for her. It's like sort of some kind of relationship thing being played out in a song. And I tried to analyze that, and I couldn't figure out exactly what that in retrospect was, or if it even was loaded with some kind of deeper thematic meaning.
What I think is interesting about that, and I know this only because I read whatever the article was that Kevin sent us, but that this character, this serial killer, is a foodie and a Kenny Chesney fan, and that is because either one or both of the guys who created the show were foodies and Kenny Chesney fans. Like, they put so much of themselves into the show that they made this serial killer have characteristics of themselves.
Oh, that's fascinating. And are those two specifically mentioned?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that actually explains why, because he's another TV writer. That of course he'd be obsessed with food.
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't realize until now this shows how disconnected I am from country music. Kenny Chesney is a real person.
I'll tell you this: Chesney loves food. I've seen him on the road, and he loves to have food.
Also, so many serial killers at his concert.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know it. The other thing that I want to point out about the food that actually ties to the urination behind the door is when he gives him the first food, he's basically talking about how great it is. It seems clear to me that he has eaten most of the food.
Yeah.
And of course, he starts eating it before the scene is over. But it's like, here, I'm giving you this thing. I'm showing you I care. And it's like this half-hearted gesture.
Right. It's clearly leftovers from the night before. And he says even like, it's really good as breakfast or whatever it is.
Right.
I don't even know what kind of food it was because I don't care for food and I don't pay attention to it. But he had a lot of elaborate descriptions of like, you got to put this sauce on this and this on this.
And it has
good.
that feeling of like, you know, that Sam is treating him like his dog, even as he's sort of, quote, dignifying him enough to get help from him.
Right. So check out The Patient.
This is not an ad for The Patient.
Everybody go see The Patient in theaters near you, opening soon.
It really did. We were so glowing about it. It does seem like we're getting some money from them, which we're not. So FX, throw us a.
I do think, I mean, here's the thing about a show like that. It is definitely not for everybody. It is uncomfortable and it is weird and disturbing. And it really upset me as the series wore on, you know?
Yeah, me too.
But it is sort of fascinating to see people explore each other's minds the way these guys do in that basement.
Yeah, it's impressive how much they, and a testament to their strengths as writers and Donald Gleason and Steve Carell as actors, that it maintains its tension and keeps your interest, unlike Sean to his therapist for the whole time.
God, what a disaster. I should have just gone on Craigslist for a therapist rather than asking you for a recommendation.
It was not my fault. I gave you my qualification. I didn't know that guy.
Do they have therapists on Angie's List?
I may have even offered you my own therapist. Yeah, probably. Yeah. And maybe go on Yelp. Don't go on Yelp.
So anyway, go out, give The Patient 4-star reviews, 5-star reviews.
We're not supporting them. Give us 4-star reviews.
And make
5
sure
stars.
Tell everybody to go see it.
Sean, you're such a novice podcaster. You just asked for something less than the top.
I'm not greedy, you know.
You asked for an 80% score. That helps us in no way.
Look, I barely graduated from college, so if I had gotten 80s during that time, I would have been so happy.
Give us 5 stars, and then if you want to say something mean in the comments, you can. But just give us the 5 stars.
And yeah, that's it. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Ding.